Hey guys, this is Ed from Match Grade Podcast, thanking all of our listeners and supporters for 1 month of being on the air. As a special for you guys, we have brought in Ed Monk from Last Resort Firearms Training to be a guest speaker for this episode. Ed Monk is a retired Army service colonel, having served 24 years of active duty. He was an educator. He's a law enforcement officer in Arkansas, as well as being a subject matter expert when it comes to the active shooter threat response. For more information, check out his website at Last Resort Firearms Training. Here's Ed Monk. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Rochester Personal Defense Podcast. With me here is Dave Jenkins, owner and founder of Rochester Personal Defense, as well as guest Ed Monk of Last Resort Firearms Training, the man, the myth, the legend. Gentlemen, welcome to the big show. This is going to be fun. I like it. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Now, Ed Monk, for our listeners who don't know all about you and what you do, can you give us a brief introduction of your history, how you came into this business, and why specifically you wanted to focus on these areas, as far as tactics, training, and why we should focus on them?
So I grew up in Arkansas, and that's currently where I live. I did 24 years in the Army active duty. The last 20, that was as an armor officer. Completed my Army career, and immediately, within 10 days of retiring from the Army, started teaching high school at a very, very good school in Kentucky. And that's what got me, the teaching experience is most of what got me into the active shooter field. But then I became a firearms instructor, been doing that since then. I was a deputy in Louisville, Kentucky for a couple of years. I'm now a part-time police officer in my home state of Arkansas. So I got focused on the active shooter problem because after a career of combat arms in the Army where we dealt with planning on being violent to other people and planning that they surely would try to be violent to us, I went to teach in a public high school, and of course, this was 2007, so the active shooter thing had been going for a couple of decades. And I got told by very, very educated, very well-meaning administrators of this school who no doubt loved the kids. I got told, along with the other teachers, listen, if we have an active shooter here in our school, your job as the authority figure, the teacher, the adult, is to gather all of your kids in the classroom and pack them into the corner of your classroom, so that when the shooter enters your classroom, you could not have done a better job for him, other than shooting your kids for him. You really can't make his job easier than bunching your kids up in the corner of the room. And I just thought this was absolute madness.
It's suicide.
Yeah, but continuing, I'm 58 years old. Many, many times throughout my life, you hear something, a policy, a decision, you think, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard of.
Yeah.
But then what you find out, well, I didn't understand all the parameters and the limitations that went into the decision. Oh, well, it makes sense now. So that's why I started researching this totally out of personal desire, because I was like, surely they've been in education for decades. Some of these principals and superintendents, they have to understand something about it that I don't. Because, well, the most simple military doctrines is if someone's trying to kill you by shooting you directly or lobbing artillery or air support on you, or you spread out, you don't group up, that makes their job easier. So I started researching it to try to find out what is it they know that I don't, and I found out there is nothing they know. That they're not bad people, they just have no experience dealing with not only violence, but deadly violence, and they don't want to. They don't want to think about it, they don't want to plan. What they want to do is have an easy solution to a problem that there is no easy solution to. Everybody is very comfortable with turning a light switch on and off. We do it multiple times a day. Everybody's comfortable with locking a doorknob. We do that all the time. It doesn't cause us any stress. Everybody's comfortable with walking over to the other side of the room. So in here I'm kind of focusing on schools, but that's why I got in. It's like, so if someone's going to come here to try to shoot 20, 30, or 50 of us, well, let's close the door, lock the knob, turn out the lights, and walk over to the corner of the room. All of those activities we're asking our teachers and students to do, they're not stressful, they don't make us feel bad, they don't trigger us. Now, they won't help. But the problem is we're making plans for the day he doesn't show up. And all those things work perfectly the day.
Exactly.
The other side of that is that's 99.99999% of days is when the active shooter's not there. So they're forming drills that are response plans that are easy to type and easy to practice and easy to drill. That's what they have, but it causes people to get killed on the day they show up. So once I started getting into it, of course, I kept and then of course there continues to be multiple shootings every year, and that just adds to the research. So I started out just doing a lot of little 10 and 15, 20-minute presentations going, listen, I don't think to mostly schools, but then businesses and eventually churches, I don't think you understand what's going to happen here, and that your plan is not going to help at all. In fact, in some cases, it'll hurt. And then that grew into 30-minute presentations, hour presentations, and then I was already a firearms instructor. So again, in my quest to go out and learn about this, I started looking for classes that were advertised as active shooter gun classes. And all the ones I found, you went, they talked about active shooters for about 30 minutes in the classroom, and then you went out to a range and just shot a normal gun class. What we did on the range did not in any way was specifically towards active shooter. So it's like, well, that's kind of not what I wanted. So that's why I developed my own.
Got it.
First a 1-day class, and then a 2-day class, and then a 3-day class. It includes classroom portions, but it's in let's focus our gun skills. And it's not a how to be a better shooter class. That's not. It's with the skills you currently have, how can we focus and tone those specifically to understand how we'll use them against the active shooter. And what we train is there's three people you're going to shoot outside your home. By far, statistically, the most likely is the mugger, the parking lot experience. And that's what most people, citizens that carry a gun outside their home, should train for. But then the other two are the active shooter and the riot and violent protester. And these are drastically different threats. And so it's going to be a drastically different fight with different skills that are prioritized and drastically different legal scrutiny, with riot, violent protester being at the one extreme end and the active shooter being at the other. So I wanted to focus this training specifically on, for those of us who go armed, what are things we can do mental-wise, tactical-wise, gear-wise, and skill-wise that'll optimize if we ever have to fight an active shooter. So now I've been researching it for 16 years. I've been providing training for about 13, and that's just lecture or classes that involve the shooting, but there's always a classroom portion to the shooting. Because again, I don't want to go ahead and shoot this target like this. Why? Why are we training to shoot a target like this? Why are we doing after action drills like this? Why? Because it connects to what we talked about in the classroom.
Now, Dave, you've also developed a training regimen against, for personal defense, addressing active shooter. Would you say your experiences are similar and your training is geared towards the same type of end goal in addressing an active shooter or an active shooter in your home, or, to Ed's point, making sure that you are prepared gear-wise, tactic-wise, training-wise to those same end goals? Or are they different at all for what you teach?
Yeah, it depends on what we're looking at. A lot of instructors out there are going to train to the common denominator that they can find. They're going to come up with skills that everybody can do and everybody can do well because it makes them feel good or it makes the shooter feel good. Whereas in some of the drills and some of the skills that we're trying to teach, we're trying to elevate those skills or refine them so that we can deliver more accurate fire under stress, under certain conditions, but we're also reducing the target size. As you've experienced in the master program, we've gone from, 8-inch diameter circles down to 3x5 cards or even smaller. Some of the drills we do are on 2-inch dots, because what is that really gearing us to do? To be more accurate at a better speed rather than taking your time to get those shots. So in a roundabout answer, yeah, I think what we're trying to do is that's kind of why when I saw Ed's program back in TACCon back here in March, within 5 minutes, I'm like, this guy's coming to Rochester. I gotta talk to him. I ran up to him at the end of the presentation. I'm like, Ed, we need to talk right away. And he was like, sure, here's a card, call me up. And I'm like texting him right away. He's like, well, this guy's probably a stalker. And here we are, a few months later, and, we put it together. We've got some good people coming out, but it's because they're hungry for that knowledge of, okay, if I'm out in public, what else can I do to ensure success? Well, can I recognize it, get out? Can I recognize it, get other people out with me? Or if I have to, what do I need to do to solve it? And so in reality, what we're going to do is we're going to dovetail the skill training that we do with the knowledge base that Ed's going to bring to this. And hopefully there's going to be a lot of bleed over in combination, so that now when we do the training, he hit it on earlier, is like, why are we shooting at this 3x5 card? Well, it mimics the heart vault right around the heart, or the ocular vault, because those are going to be the hits that are going to stop this incident a lot faster. It's not going to be the one in the flank. It's just going to get his attention, maybe slow him down a little bit. But really what we're trying to do is we're like, okay, why am I shooting at this 3x5? Well, it's to stop the guy that's doing the things that Ed's talking about this weekend. So yeah, I think it's a good blend and it's a good augment. And if we can subject ourselves to a certain amount of stress and training where we are getting better hits faster under that level of stress and expectation, then, the application of it, the why, is going to matter a lot more. And so, yeah, that's why I said, this thing, sitting through Ed's presentation, I was like, oh yeah, here we go. This is it.
As I said before, I got into this for personal reasons very quickly after my military career. And when I first started researching it, I even first started designing the hands-on gun training for it, I didn't think my military career had anything to do with it. It wasn't related at all, because never shot an active shooter in the military. They never trained us to shoot an active shooter. But now I've come to realize that the process of preparing training for it really, really does. Because here's what we expect a combat arms officer in the Army to do, infantry, armor, to look at a threat or a potential threat that we know we're going to have to fight or we may have to fight, and define that, to study it and define it. What are its weapon systems that we can expect it to use? What are its capabilities? What are its strengths that we have to guard against? What are its weaknesses that we can exploit? What are its most likely courses of action? How is it most likely to act when we encounter it? That's how you study a threat and understand it. And the threat is half the fight. The fight is the threat, and then the environment that you expect to fight that threat in. Because when I was a tank company commander, if I got told you're going to fight a Soviet motorized rifle brigade, well, that Soviet motorized rifle brigade, that doesn't change. But whether I'm going to fight that Soviet military unit in the Arctic of Alaska, or the open terrain of Europe, or the sands of Saudi Arabia, the environment that I'm going to fight makes a difference. So the threat and the environment make up the fight. We have to understand that, because that's got to be in training. Both the drills that we have students do, but also in the scenarios, because we want that as realistic as possible. So that's step one, understanding the fight. And then step two is, okay, given that I understand the threat and the environment, what's the best operational fighting plan I can come up with to defeat that threat that I just defined, with two parameters are always as the measurement. How can I defeat that threat in the least amount of time with the fewest amount of friendly casualties? That's always the measuring stick. How can I end this fight as quick as I can with the fewest number of us hurt? Once I think I have the fighting plan the best I can, then the third is, okay, training. What's the best training plan I can develop to train my fighters how to execute that fighting plan to defeat that threat that I just defined? And that's what I bring to this, and that's what I see. I don't see anybody else bringing.
Right. So let's break that down a little bit further as far as studying the threat.
Yeah.
Would you say, based upon your experience and studies and data that has been collected, is there a specific type of profile, or is there a certain type as far as equipment, that active shooters tend to use? Are you seeing handguns? Are you seeing long guns? Are you seeing multiple magazines?
Yeah, it's almost always going to be a male. In the past, it's usually been a young male, but I'm not sure yet whether that's a trend that's starting to change. We're starting to see, I have seen a few more in the last several years, older males. I don't know whether that's a blip or that's going to be a new trend we're going to see. What I tell students is you're more likely to see multiple guns, and at least one of them will be a long gun, and that's what he'll start with. But I tell them right up front, there's two government studies that contradict me. They say, no, less than 30% of the time will you see a long gun or multiple guns. But I think those two government studies define the active shooter much more broadly than I do. If a guy goes to his work and shoots his boss and then clocks out, I consider that a murder-suicide, that's not what I define as an active shooter. So a lot of these studies define active shooter where I wouldn't define a lot of the instances they pull the data from. So anyway, okay, 2 to 4 weapons seems to be the norm. One had 5, the Louisville plant had 5, but usually 2 to 4. Usually one of them will be a long gun. So they start with their long gun, shoot it till it's empty or malfunctions, which happens a lot. Dump it, go to the second gun. If they have it, not all do. Shoot the second gun till it's empty or malfunctions. Dump it, go to the third gun if they have it. Again, 4 is there's only been a few 4s. There's been 1 5 that I know of. So there's a couple of things that come to mind with that one. One is you're very likely to be outgunned, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he has. It matters what you have. It doesn't matter if he has a rifle, a shotgun, flamethrower, or a bazooka. If you put 1 or 2 of your bullets in his brain or 4 or 5 in his chest, you'll be okay. It doesn't matter what he has. And most active shooters, the vast majority of them are extremely low skilled. So you may be outgunned. You shouldn't be outskilled. For the armed citizen carrying in public, they are more likely to see the long gun because they will be there when it starts. No armed citizen, I hope, is driving down the road and hears, hey, there's an active shooter just reported at the mall, and they start driving over to the mall to take care of that. But it's the cops that show up 3, 5, 7, 9, 12 minutes into he might have dumped the long gun and gone to a handgun. So don't let that freak you out. They very well may have a long gun. What that does do is it makes it much easier to identify who the bad guy is. In 20 minutes after it starts, there'll be a bunch of long guns here as all the cops show up. But in that first 30 seconds, shouldn't be a long gun in your church or the school or the mall or your workplace in general. So it makes it very easy to identify and just know your skill level. So that's one of the things to point out. They will usually start in a gun-free zone, a place where it's illegal for anybody to have a gun. This is not a political thing on their part. This is strictly a mathematical thing. Their ultimate goal, not all of them, but the vast majority of them, their ultimate goal is to be famous. To get famous, they have to have media coverage. To get media coverage, they need to shoot a lot of people. If you go to Rochester tonight and shoot one person, you'll make the Rochester news. But nobody in Alabama will know who you are. But if you go to Rochester tonight and shoot 30 people, tomorrow morning, everybody in the world with an internet connection will know your face, your name, every social media post you've ever made, any manifesto that you typed or video recorded. So that's what most of them want. So they have to get a high body count. Well, you can't go into a police station or an NRA convention and shoot a lot of people because it won't last long. You will get shot back at quickly. So they, not always, but usually go to some place where it's illegal to have a gun. So when they show up with their illegal gun, they're the only ones that can shoot until we can get somebody there with a gun, and that time delay is more than enough time to stack bodies. Now, that is a trend over the last 20 years that is shifting. I see 10, 15 years ago, if someone started shooting in a place where people could carry guns, I would say, wow, mark that one. That's a unique thing. That's rare. It's not as rare anymore, but I think that's because more and more states and places it's legal to carry. So that in almost all the states you can legally carry. So then they have to go into schools. They have to go into places that it's illegal to have a gun, because in most states, in most businesses, Walmarts, grocery stores, etc., you can have a gun.
So in a lot of cases, the states that are enacting the constitutional carry, or they're relaxing the rules on civilians getting pistol licenses and or just being able to carry under the Constitution, we're kind of limiting where they can strike. We're cutting out some places where they could go.
Well, or increasing the danger if they decide to go. Now, sometimes we make them pay the price for that, and sometimes we don't. El Paso, Texas, Walmart. Yeah, when they're shot 46 people. El Paso, Texas. Yeah. You would think, and it's likely, or I would say it's extremely possible, somebody in and around there had a gun, but chose not to confront him. And if they don't have a badge and an oath, then they don't have to. But then sometimes, like Jack Wilson in the church in Texas, or Eli Dickin in the mall in Indiana, we make them pay the price. And that's what we need to do. The more armed people there are in more locations, the better chance we can end their attacks. We'll either deter them and relocate them, or we'll end the attack very quickly.
Yeah, a lot of people don't want to believe that. They don't want to think about that because I think it scares them. Not only the fact that, it can't happen in my school. It shouldn't happen here because we have this, or because we have a security guard, or we have a patrol officer on scene. Well, we've all probably seen the news on how that really didn't work. And then also in some cases where it did work, but it's not a constant. It seems like it's
exactly
not the typical.
Having a uniformed law enforcement officer present is a deterrent, but it's not 100% deterrent. It offers some deterrence, but when I talk to schools, I show them a slide with 11 school attacks. All the attackers of those schools were students of those schools, so they knew that the SRO was there, the cop was there, and they attacked anyway. But they're students of the school, so they know who the cop is, what he or she looks like, so they just don't attack right in front of the cop. They go to another building, another floor, and attack there. I can't tell you how many schools, and my training calendar had just got crazy since the Uvalde attack. But several people said, Ed, we heard you're coming to talk to our school, looking forward to it. But just to let you know, we've got a resource officer. We have a full-time so we're good. We're okay.
And how do you just not laugh in their face? And
well, no, but they don't know. It's the illusion of security.
Yep.
Now, there's some deterrent there. Townville Elementary. The shooter said, I'm either going to do the middle school or the elementary. And one of three reasons he chose the elementary is they didn't have a resource officer. And the middle school does. So there's a deterrent there, but it's not 100%, and it's not 100% guaranteed that it won't be a low victim count if they show up.
Right.
As we saw in Parkland and Columbine and Santa Fe. Santa Fe had 2 cops on campus, but the shooter was a student of that school and went over to a building where the cops weren't. So
yeah, you don't think they don't gather their own intel?
Yeah, and that's another thing. We, in the military, when we did the best plan we get, then we war gamed that plan, and someone acted as the enemy, and that's what a lot of people aren't doing when they make their plans. Is they're making their plan to counter a cooperative enemy instead of a evil, adaptive, creative enemy who wants to win. And so they think, well, we'll lock our doors. So you think this guy with 3 guns and 1,100 rounds of ammo is going to come up and rattle the doorknob and go, oh, darn, they locked it, turn around and go away.
Yeah.
Or they're just going to shoot through the glass and walk in like they did at Covet. They just haven't thought through how ugly this is going to be. They haven't heard it.
There's a lot of, so I've been finding that in my career as an instructor, there are a lot of people out there that, I guess it's good that they don't understand the level of violence somebody's willing to commit against other humans. But there's a lot of people out there that I think that should have a small measure of what's possible. Because, I've seen stories, I've talked to people, I've been in situations where once you used it earlier, like we're used to going and throwing a switch, but once these murderers decide to throw the switch and go kill people, they're not human anymore. They're not thinking like us. They're not acting like us. They're not rationalizing their actions like us. They're totally different.
I tell people, I can't explain to you chemically what's going on in a dog's brain when it goes rabid.
Exactly.
I just know you got to deal with the dog.
Yeah.
And I can't explain the Chardon, Ohio shooter who at his sentencing hearing looked over at the families of the people he killed and said, I masturbate at the memory of killing your sons.
Yeah.
I can't understand that thinking, but I just know they got to be dealt with.
All right.
And so it brings up, a lot of people who choose not to have a gun in their home or to carry a gun, and that's their choice, no problem. But they'll say, 9 times out of 10, they just want the money. They just want your car, and the convenience store, I'll give them the cash register. And statistically, they're correct.
But what if you're that 1%, right?
But with the active shooter, it's going to start with him shooting people. So, with a mugger or a robber, there's a decent chance he will not actually use the violence. He'll just threaten it. But the active shooter, you're going to know you've got one after he shot his first or second person.
Yeah.
So there is no negotiating. There is no call the insurance company and they'll replace everything and go back to normal. He is going to start shooting people and shoot somebody every few seconds. So we have to act. There is no put your hands up, comply with what he wants, and 9 times out of 10 you'll be okay. That doesn't exist here.
Right. So we had, recently we had a shooting here just about an hour west of us in Buffalo.
Yep.
We had that individual, and I was able to see the footage that he was videoing himself doing it, that he posted. And it was, people are like, oh, I'll have time to notice it. I'll have time to react. I think the first 3 victims had 0 reaction time. There was no time. He got out of the car and just started shooting.
Yep.
And, the first couple of people inside the doorway of the store, they heard little pops. And by the time their brain went into, that's not normal, he was in the vestibule shooting them.
Yes. You're going to be behind the power curve.
Yeah.
And you've got 1,000 things on your mind. You're in a grocery store. You got your grocery list. You're thinking about things you have to do after you leave the grocery store, the thing you got to do when you get home, and for the things you have to, you're in that world. He's been planning this attack. The Buffalo guy planned it for over 2 years.
Yeah.
And then, so that's what collides you and your world with 50 nonviolent things on your mind. And then the first shot goes off and there you are. Those two worlds collide.
Yeah. They, I've talked to people who, revisited a lot of the account. I've actually met somebody who was in that store that day. They came to a class just a little while ago to become an instructor because they want to teach people how to be safer, and they wanted to use the NRA credential to just be a little more legitimate. They wanted to have something. They're in the Black community, and they related to me the story of they were in that store, and they said basically all I could think about was, I need to hide, or else this guy's going to find me because I cannot do a thing about this.
Yep.
And that was their choice. They said, I can't fight him. I can't get out. I don't know how to get out of here, but I'm going to hide. And they hid in a back room, and when all was said and done, they just stayed there. And the shooting was done for minutes, and they stayed there. And then they finally peeked out, and they saw a lot of uniforms walking around, and then they came out, and they were like, I had no idea the level of violence that was in the front of that store because they took us out the back door. Yeah. But it was that, and they said, I don't want to be that helpless again.
Yep. I don't want to be the rabbit when the wolf shows up because the rabbit can't fight back against the wolf.
And it was a pretty moving discussion. And I'm planning on sitting with them more to talk about how much they've grown since then and what they've also found out. But and I said, what would you have thought if you'd had a firearm with you, if you'd had a handgun with you right there or something? And they're like, I don't know. It never crossed my mind. And I've thought about this incident time and time and time again. And I just don't know if I would have been able to do anything because I don't know what I would have been able to do. It's that vicious cycle. It's like people call it paralysis by analysis, right? I'm going to think about so much I can't do anything, but this person was just frozen because they had no options. They didn't know what they're capable of.
If you're haven't gone through the process to carry the gun, you haven't obviously thought through the ugliness of using it against another human in any way. But from my military experience, that and that's when we get back into the training. That's why my goal in the scenario training when I do that is multiple successful runs. Because from my military experience, if you've done something successful, then if you ever have to do it under an extremely stressful situation, you might be shaking, you might be scared out of your mind, but something in your subconscious is telling you, hey, you've done this. You've done this successfully before.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be dangerous and it's scary, but this is not new territory.
Right.
You're not figuring this out. You just apply what you've already done and already succeeded at, and it'll work.
There's that first idea of you plan it out and you game plan it out in your head, but as soon as that first shot goes off, you're going to be resorting to your lowest level of training. And if you have not trained to use your firearm at all, you're going to be panicky. Your heart rate is going to be jacked up to 100. Blood's going to be pumping, and you might not have the confidence or the ability to get that first effective shot. And that's why we train. That's why we try to raise the minimum level so that if that should happen, we can resort to a much higher, lowest level of training so that we can engage that shooter, so we can end things quickly.
Yeah, and increase your odds of success. There is no guarantee. There is no guarantee. I just, if you carry a gun, that's not a guarantee you'll be safe against any threat. But what gives you an option that you wouldn't have, a very powerful option that you wouldn't have if you didn't carry it.
The thing that I look at is the video that I saw from Buffalo. The first two victims, even if they had watched him drive up and park in the no parking zone, instead of the one victim was putting grocery bags in the back of his car, and he didn't even know what was coming, and he didn't know what hit him. But even if you had seen this person coming up, it's just that reactionary curve, that human response delay that kicks in. I don't know. I don't think if somebody were standing right there next to that first person that got shot, if they wouldn't have been shot before they can even think about getting their gun out of their holster.
He shot 3 or 4 out before he went in. They were just all. Yeah. No, even gun training people don't expect to be walking into their grocery store and a guy step out of the driver's side of the door with an AR and start shooting people.
Yeah.
We normalcy bias, but that all of us are going to have some delay. 24 years military, 13, 14 years law enforcement, 15 years as a professional gun trainer. I've heard millions of gunshots go off.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure I've heard any inside of a building without hearing protection. So we're all going to have a delay. I think the goal is to have it as short as possible. And again, if you've had classes and you've seen these active shooter attacks and that file is in your subconscious, then when popping sounds, you don't go to the only thing you've ever thought about, which is fireworks. The lockers are slamming. Someone dropped a book, but you go, oh, that it could be that.
It could.
I've studied that. I understand that's a possibility, and your brain goes there quicker than most people do. I mean, just Sandy Hook, the number of things that people inside that building, their brain went to. The weirdest one was a teacher, not right where the shooting, down the hall. She said to her, the sound she was hearing sounded like someone cranking an aluminum can outside her door. That's where her brain went. So again, gunshots inside of a school building, even to gun people, or inside of a mall. Well, Eli Dickin at the mall in Indiana, he heard the shooting and he fairly quickly recognized it as probable shooting, but it was echoing. It was bouncing around the food court, so he didn't know what direction it was going.
Right. Yeah.
We're all going to have some kind of delay.
There's that kind of psychological factor that this can't really be happening. So our brain tries to rationalize that sound into something familiar, something that we've heard of before, and realize, hey, this can't be happening. This shooting can't be happening in this mall. It can't be this school. That sound has got to be, something else, somewhere else.
Yeah. And so in my scenario training, not the first scenario, but the first scenario is usually very simple because I'm just trying to see, can the student apply the skills he showed me on a paper target? The drill, can he apply that now in this situation of the scenario? Once that's accomplished, then it gets more complicated each time that they show success. And so eventually they will get the sounds of gunfire, the sounds of screaming, the sounds of the fire alarm going off, the strobe light of the fire alarm going off. They'll start getting what they expect, what I would expect a responder to see or hear as they go in there.
Now, as far as training and educating, resource officers, schools, church parishes, and things like that, would you say your training is geared towards a specific audience? Is it for those resource officers? Is it for teachers? Is it for the just average civilian who might be carrying in those public places?
It depends. It depends on if it's an open enrollment class, then it's going to be more generic. And I might allude to something if I have a couple of cops in there or a couple of armed school staff. I'm in Arkansas. We're allowed to have armed school staff. But if I'm teaching only armed school staff, then we're going to do almost all the focus on school shootings. But even if you are a school staff member who goes armed during the day, you still have to have a plan on Saturday night if you're at the movie theater, Sunday morning you're in your church, or Tuesday evening you're at Walmart after you leave the school. So you have to have a personal plan that's not part of the school plan. If I'm talking to resource officers, then it's going to be a little bit different. If I'm talking to just uniformed officers, it's going to be different because they're going to go wherever the shooting happens, not just at schools. So one of the things, if it's a resource officer at a middle or a high school, or if it's an armed school staff at a middle or a high school, one of the things I cover is they better wrap their brain around the fact that if this happens in their location, they're going to be putting their front sight, or dot for the new people.
Yes.
They're going to be putting their sights on a teenager or maybe 11 or 12-year-old, because middle and high school shootings are almost always students of those schools. So we don't want them to have problems with as they're going towards the sound of the gunfire and they find what they're looking for, that they get freaked out because I'm about to shoot a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old.
And it's going to be somebody that they've probably interacted with quite a bit.
Possibly.
Yeah.
And they can't let that stop them. So, it depends on who. If I'm in a church talking to a church team, then that will cover mostly church shootings and who those people are and how they act a little differently. And it will affect the skills that are prioritized. So as I've gone through what I discussed with the military experience, so now I'm going to develop training. Well, training is finite in time, so we can't train everything. So we have to make a priority list of those skills that are most important, at least what I think is if I'm developing this training. Well, quick draw out of a holster, concealed or duty, is not a priority skill for me for active shooter training, with some exceptions, because I only know of 2 cases, Jack Wilson being one, where a quick, efficient draw out of a holster for active shooter was part of the game. And most of the time it's not. Now, if I'm teaching armed citizens how to deal with the parking lot mugger, if they decide to fight, then the quick, efficient draw is important. If I'm dealing with cops with a traffic stop gone bad suddenly, quick draw out of the holster is way up there at the top. Generally with active shooter, it's not. But if I have a church security team and I'm dealing with the part of the team that's in the sanctuary, like Jack Wilson, then that might be an exception. If I'm dealing with the SRO or the school armed staff who's going to be in the cafeteria, then that might be a difference. Because in a high school, cafeteria is one of the highest places that it'll happen. So if they're going to see it when it starts. Most people who stop active shooters don't see the shooting when it starts. They may hear it, but then they have to move toward it, which you can take plenty of time to get the gun out of the holster. The quick draw is not that important.
You just got to be ready to get sights on target.
So as an instructor, if you take somebody and you have to train them to safely draw the gun out of that takes, and you're only teaching a 1-day class, that's going to take up quite a bit of that 1-day class.
Exactly.
I try to eliminate stuff and I've had other instructors criticize me quite a bit online about, well, you got to teach building search. If I've had several. If you're not teaching building search in an active shooter gun class, you're a disservice to your students. So then I give them a list of 30 active shooters where a good armed person stopped them, cop or civilian, doesn't matter. And no building search was required. And I'm like, I'm not saying it's a bad skill to know, but it's just not a priority. And that takes a long time to train somebody how to properly clear a building, ring search. That takes a lot of time. So if I'm only going to teach a 1-day class in active shooter, that's not a top priority. If I get to a 3 or 4-day class and they want to learn that might not be a priority.
Yeah, there's topics to spend more time on if you got a 1 or 2-day class.
Yep.
That are more important. It's in reality, it's, I'm looking at the basics of everything when we're talking about training and teaching. Yeah, when you're shooting a gun, it's sights and trigger.
Yep.
And then whatever your target is, you're having good sights, a good sight picture or dot, and you've got your trigger management pretty well under lock and key, and then it's whatever you got to shoot.
Yep.
All the other stuff is the ancillary stuff. It's the secondary.
2 of the other differences between, me and other instructors and active shooter training versus other training. One of them is, and this is really all training for us, we stress 100% hits is the goal. Now, are you going to miss? Of course you are, because you're human, and I am too. And for several reasons, but you never ever try to miss, and you don't accept misses. And I get beat up on that. Instructor, that's not realistic. 100% hits is not realistic. Okay,
why not?
Your 14-year-old daughter's in the cafeteria of her high school when the active shooter kicks off in there, and the armed school staff member or the SRO goes in there to take care of it. What percentage hits would you like that armed responder to get in that crowded cafeteria with your 14-year-old daughter? Well, of course it's 100%. Yeah. So you bet 70, 80, 85, 90% in training, but by God, under stress, we want 100%. That's probably not the logical way to go about it. And so what we say is we talk Rule 4, but we don't train Rule 4. Our Rule 4, the way we teach it, be sure of your target and what's in line with your target. And when we beat people up about it, if it's an instructor level class, that's a test question. You have to know that. You got to know it. And then we take you out to a range in most cases, and we put you on a line, and the range Nazi doesn't let anybody out in front of you. So you ain't got to worry about that. And the only thing in front of you is a target, maybe with your name on it, so there's no discrimination there. And there's a big wall of dirt if you're on an outdoor range, big wall of dirt behind it. So we talk to Rule 4 in the classroom, but of course we don't train it because that's unsafe on the range. And so that's another thing we do in the scenarios is we put you in Rule 4 problems.
Okay.
And even on a range, so you can never be sure about Rule 4. I might come into a room in a store, in my church, in a school, and I see nobody between me and the guy I'm going to have to shoot, and nobody behind him. But what is behind him? Well, it's a wall. Most interior walls aren't bulletproof, so I don't know what's on the other. I can't see anything on the other side of him. But if there's a wall and I don't know that wall's ballistic, then I have no idea what's on the other side of him.
And heck, you might have that teacher with that group of students hiding in that corner
of the wall,
on the other side of that wall.
Yep.
So you're going to miss, and guess what?
We show real-world Rule 4 problems in actual shootings in the classroom. And eventually, not the first scenario, but eventually they will get to where they have friendlies on the other side. Now, here's what I found. About half the students don't see the innocent on the other side. And I don't fault them for that. What are you going there looking for?
Target.
A guy with a gun, a guy shooting. And so that's what you're looking. You see that. You're focused in 99% on that. You may not look behind you. You don't want to take the time. I found what I came here for. So what fixes everything, whether you see him or not, whether he's in the room and you don't see him, talking about the innocent person, or they're on the other side of the wall, is to get 100% solid, not grazing hits, fat roll hits, collar hits, 100% solid torso hits with your hollow points. And if anybody is behind them or may be behind them in the other room, they're at very minimal risk. So that's why 100% hit fixes everything.
Yeah.
And another difference is in most gun training, you know, I've gone to how many, and okay, 3-yard line, draw and shoot 2 rounds and the instructor tells you where to stand and how many shots. So you get back to the 25 for most, even decent gun people. Draw and shoot 3 standing and 2 kneeling, or, you know, whatever. Well, I'm going to do my best back here, but I'm going to probably throw a couple. I shoot what the instructor tells me to shoot. That's what students in the class do. And in my active shooter training, we do the training, what's called a fade back drill. So everybody knows how far back from the target they can guarantee a hit. So once we get in scenarios, I never tell them from where to shoot the target from. That's one thing they got to figure out. There's the target. Well, you come into the attack area and you see him at 30 yards. But in the previous training, you just proved to yourself you can't guarantee hits past 10. So I got to have the tactical patience to now, oh, there he is. Well, he doesn't need to be shot at. He needs to be shot. So you have the tactical patience to move within your skill level. So in most gun classes, you're told where to shoot from. When we get to scenarios, you decide where to shoot from. With the parameters being, they better be 100% solid hits.
Yeah. We can't miss.
And that's one of the biggest mistakes, usually not in my instructor level classes, but most armed church teams, armed school teams, cops, as soon as they see the active shooter, they start slinging rounds. Mm-hmm. Because, again, rule 4, on the range, we talk about hits and misses. I try to hit the target. If I do, it's a hit. Good. If I don't, it's a miss. At the most, it's embarrassing, but a miss on the range doesn't ruin anybody's life. And like Tom Gibbons says in his class, in a gunfight, there are no misses. There are only unintended hits.
Yeah, every bullet hits something.
Yeah, every bullet hits something, or ricochets off of something before it hits something. So you have to guarantee your hits and have the tactical patience. If your wobble doesn't stay inside where you want, then get closer. And that's tough for a lot of people because, well, we tell them the monkey's going to be on your back screaming, there he is, shoot him. Well, not yet, because I got no business shooting back.
So it's interesting you brought that up. I was just down in Wakefield, Virginia recently doing a class, and once we got past the weather issues, we actually got some good training done. And a couple of people in there you could tell they were taking it very seriously. We were having them shoot chest cavity boxes and 3x5 cards, and we did Dave's fade back drill. So we worked it back, and everybody stayed on target for the most part till about 7 yards. We had a couple misses, 10 yards, had a few more misses. We got to 15, and then the struggle started. As one of my instructors says, some people get on the struggle bus a little bit. And what happened is we stopped there. And I kind of threw that idea out there. I'm like, okay, now you guys know at what distance you can guarantee a hit on a target. And if you can't guarantee a hit at this distance, you need to do some work, is what I challenged it into. And in my mind, and a couple guys picked up on it, they're like, so if I'm defending myself and I'm trying to get a center of mass hit, I shouldn't be trying it from 15 yards. So that in a roundabout way, they got to your point. And I'm like, yeah, you should either do a lot more work, get better at it, or get closer to your target.
Exactly. Everybody knows their ability, and I work within your capabilities. Clint Eastwood said every man needs to know his limitations. If you're more cup half full person, then everyone needs to know their capabilities. So exactly. Class, it's not a competition. It's not, I can hit further than you can. So let's take a church team. Mm-hmm. We 3 here, and we got 4 or 5 more armed in our church team. Well, God love me, I can't get consistent hits past 7, but you're getting them back to 18. Well, guess what? I'm not your parking lot guy. You're our parking lot guy.
Yeah.
Well, but Ed loves to be in the parking lot. Well, it ain't about what Ed likes. Ed's capability needs to be in a place that's a smaller
Right.
chance of a smaller shot.
Asset allocation.
And I think all of us, probably me included, we like to think, and sometimes we say we're better than we are. And in most classes, so again, we started the 5-yard line, 10 out of 10 shots in the chest circle, right? And if you make that, you move back to the 7. If you 10 out of 10, all 10. If you make that, you move back to the 10. Everybody is eventually going to miss. So by that drill, everyone is going to miss, because eventually every step back you take, that circle gets smaller, and your wobble will eventually wobble outside that circle.
And my magic unicorn dust does not work.
Right. Don't think that. But what will get people that'll throw around at the 7. And there's no time limit here.
Oh, yeah.
It's not out of the holster, 1.5 seconds. Now, don't smoke a cigarette between each round, but guarantee
Exactly.
hits. And they'll throw one at the 7. They go, well, I'm better than that.
Not today or
You
not.
weren't. That's right. Today you weren't. And what we want is 100% hits every day on your worst day, not most days on your best day.
Yeah. You don't want to be 90% when you're expecting.
Woke up without a lot of sleep, and you had 4 cappuccinos
Yeah.
right before this kicked off. So and I remember I took an active shooter class, which I wasn't really happy with. But one of the things he did in the classroom, he's 3x5 course. Everybody put on there at what yard, how many yards from, and he showed us the silhouette target with a head box. How many yards back can you guarantee a headshot?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing I put 7 or 10. But he gathered them all up. They're like 35, 30, 20. And I'm looking around and go, holy cow, I'm going to get embarrassed out there. These guys, I am by far the weakest guy in this class. But everyone's exaggerating. It's like, given a magazine of 15, I can probably get a headshot at 25 yards. But that's not what we're after here. We're after 100%.
Yeah. Where can you guarantee it?
Yep.
Call the shot, right?
Because, whether someone's trying to qualify for a concealed carry license, or for an instructor class, or for cops that qualify, if you don't meet the abysmal minimal standard, they say go back and reload your mags and let's try this again. And as long as you get it on the 5th or 6th attempt, you have met the minimum standard. Go back and reload your mags and do it again. There's no mulligans in a real shooting, not just active shooter, but a mugger inside your hand. There are no do-overs. So you have to have that in the back of your mind and have the patience to get your hits.
Yeah. I was talking to one guy. We were just talking about, street scenes and, hey, a buddy might ran into this situation. How would you analyze this? And I'm like, we can't, because it's going to be different. I go, you can give me the same scenario and I'll put you in it, and it's going to play out totally different because of our experience and our capabilities and our background and our knowledge and our expectation. But we got talking about a shooting incident where there was, a crowd of people. There was an outdoor setting, and he's like, what would you do in that case? And I'm like, if I can't run and hide, and if I find out I'm the only one that might be able to be equipped to stop him, I might have to use the chaos of people running to close the distance. And if I need to get as close to where I can put the muzzle of the gun into his eyeball to pull the trigger to guarantee a hit so that nobody else gets hurt, then that's what's going to take. And it was funny is this individual I was talking to has had some training, but not a lot. And we got talking about afterwards, but he said, well, that's kind of harsh. Aren't you putting yourself at risk? I go, I'm putting myself at risk by staying there if I can't run. I'm putting myself at risk every day leaving the house, but it's how do I manage it?
And if you don't if you're the only armed person there and you don't put yourself at risk, then what's the alternative? Yeah, it's going to happen.
Everybody dies.
Yeah.
And I'm not looking to be a hero. And I told him that. It's like, my goal isn't to be a hero. My goal is to make sure that I can go home tonight with the least amount of injury or damage or involvement possible. If that means I don't ever have to draw my gun or have to think about it, okay. But in a setting like this, if it means that I have to find a way to get inside his reach and put a round into his cranium to stop people from dying, then that's what it's going to have to take. And I know I'm probably going to get hurt doing it, but we got to stop people from killing other people.
Well, I'm not so sure it's that definite you will get hurt, because if you look at it, only a couple of whole list of cops been shot.
Right.
Only a couple of armed citizens have been shot in stopping this. These guys are not, and so are they dangerous? The active shooter? Well, yeah. Of course, they're evil people with one or more guns in public shooting people, but they are not that tough of an opponent.
Right.
They are really, if you have a gun if you can't get hits past 5 yards, get within 5. If you don't have a gun, you have to get within arm's distance. So even the weakest skilled person with a gun, as long as they have the tactical patience, still has a greater advantage than going distance. But that's all it is. Get within your distance and shoot. They're just enough tough of an opponent. Armed citizens have never shot the wrong person while stopping an active shooter. Cops have multiple times.
I know.
Cops have shot and killed innocent people in responding to an active shooter. Cops have shot each other at least 3 times. They've killed each other at least twice responding to active shooters.
Yeah.
Now, now is that because armed citizens are just better trained than cops? No, it's because the armed citizen is only going to stop this if they're there. Again, no armed citizen is going to be driving down the road, hear on the radio, shooting at them all, and then drive over there to take care of it.
I hope not.
So if you're there if you can hear or see the first shot, and it's scary, but it's a lot less confusing than a cop showing up 5 minutes into it, 8 minutes into it.
Yeah.
And when one cop shows up very shortly, a whole bunch of others. So now you got a bunch of cops walking around looking. It's a lot more dynamic and a lot more risky than it is in that first minute if you're there when it happens.
Right.
And armed citizens have a better shoot rate. Jack was 1 out of 1. Vic Stacy was 5 out of 5. My friend, Pastor David George, was 5 out of 5. Eli Dickin was 6 out of 8. The 2 he missed were at 50-something yards. So, but you look at cops, and like when they blew the hole in the wall at Pulse, the police report I read said they fired 172 rounds, hit him 7 times.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reports about that where they just shoot a lot of rounds. And there's one cop, and he was an SRO that took my training in Mississippi. He said, we were always trained, get in there and send rounds down range. So there's that term, rounds down range. That's military or send rounds down range.
You can't use cover fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of surgically put 1 to 5 bullets where they need to be in that one person.
Yeah. The shotgun approach usually doesn't work with a crowd. You gotta have that rifle approach. You've got to have that sniper mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
Because like you said, with your discussion about what if it was his 14-year-old daughter, you're going to want that whoever is delivering rounds back at the bad guy, you're going to want that person to be a surgeon level skill shooter.
Exactly. Whether that's a surgical at 5 yards, 8 yards, or 17 yards, it's whatever they know their skill level is.
Exactly. Yeah, I just got a whole new idea for a drill. So Ed's already seeing the wheels turn. He's like, "Oh, I can't wait for the next master group." We got
another Dave Jenkins curveball from left field.
Yeah, I had a cop I was training when I explained the Rule 4 thing, and he said, "So what you're saying is we need to bring the streets into the range, not do what we do on the range and take it to the streets." And I said, "Not only are you right, but I'm flat stealing that."
Yeah,
and that's the way his brain did it. We got to start taking what we expect on the range or on the streets and put it in the range.
Oh, we're building all these range scars unknowingly. I learned about this a long time ago with a bunch of stuff, and I took a look at what I was teaching, and I was like, oh my God, I'm building in hesitation in the draw stroke, because for a long time I was taught, and I also taught, and I'll admit this, and this was even before Ed's time. Ed's been training with me for quite a few years, but we were teaching draw up, join, and then pause to make sure the grip's correct, and then you push the gun out. Instead of make it one fluid motion, we were teaching this 4 and 5 and 6 step draw as gospel instead of a starting point. And I quickly decided, you know what? The draw stroke needs to go from like 3 to 1 step. Get the gun out, it's on target. Don't worry about anything else in between. Let the body decide where that gun needs to go based on what the eyes are looking at. And I found that my own skill set got better once I decided, okay, we need to get rid of these hesitations for range convenience or range safety, because like your guy pointed out, I'm going to steal what you stole from him. We got to stop taking the range into the street.
Yep. And that's, we see people get shot.
We can't have hesitation. An example of that is, there have been people that have been seriously hurt because they followed the old mindset of 2 shots and assess. Well, the 2 shots didn't work because you either missed the first one or didn't hit him well with either one, and he's still a viable threat, and he's watching you lower your gun to see what you did to him.
Or you got decent hits that will cause his death in a few minutes, but he's just not really impressed with that right now.
Right.
And so the old saying is, shooting somebody to death doesn't really work that well if you don't live to see it. So it's not about, did my bullet rip through stuff that will eventually cause him to lose consciousness in 3 minutes? It's about stopping the violent behavior.
Yeah.
And so, again, that's why if I've trained somebody before in a school and they come back and say, hey, man, all we can really carve out, we need a 2-hour, tune-up range. But if I've never trained them before and they want, no, we just want range, we don't want classroom, I won't do that. Because they got to understand why we're doing it on the range. So like after-action drills. In a lot of training I've taken, the after-action drill is a dance you have to do because the instructor showed you the dance. And he said, after you shoot the drill that I've told you to shoot how many rounds from whatever line, now you do this dance that I've told you to do.
Mm-hmm.
Look different directions, and everybody does it different. And so it's just, okay, do it to make the instructor happy. And I was like, no. So I show them in shootings where active shooters took multiple hits before they went to the ground, or they took multiple hits and then went to the ground and kept shooting from the ground.
Yeah.
Or they took multiple hits, went to the ground, got back up. So we call that round 2. So you say the round 1 is shooting them to the ground. How many rounds will that take? I don't know. Here, let me show you some videos where 1 did it, 2 did it, 3 did it, 5 did it, 7 did it. And I'll have people, when we get to the scenario part, they'll come in and go pop, pop, and then holster. And our 3-dimensional targets fall when they hit an appropriate number. Why'd you holster? Well, I know I hit him. Well, is hitting him the goal or putting him on the ground the goal?
Yeah, he's still there.
So put him on the ground. And then once that, okay, congratulations, you just won round 1 of this fight. Is it going to be a round 2? Well, there could be, and who gets to decide that? Well, it's the dude you just shot to the ground. He can fight you from down there, or he can stand back up. So it's not do this after-action dance because the instructor wants you to do it. It's, look, here's Gina saw him, shot 5 times, put him on his back. He sat back up from the ground, shot his AK. Vic shot the guy at 55 yards, put him to the ground, then he wheeled over from the ground with his rifle and started shooting at Vic. Just numerous times where they weren't really impressed with 1, 2, 3, or 4 of your hits.
Or it hurt a little bit, but they figured I can still I can still be famous.
Yep. Guy in St. Cloud, Minnesota, cop shot him 3 times in the front, went to the ground, got back up, shot him 3 times in the back, went to the ground, got back up. Yeah, I just don't know. So that's why we do the after-action drill, is to make sure not only you think you're done, but make sure he thinks he's done.
Which seems so contrary to what we hear in the news and popular media and things like that about, oh, well, this is a classic, and I put classic in quotes, a classic case of overkill of, well, why did the armed citizen shoot him 8 times? Well, you shot him 8 times because 7 times the guy was still rolling around going for his gun.
No, it took Eli Dickin 8 hits to put the guy on the ground. So I can't tell you how many it's going to take.
Yeah, nobody knows. Nobody knows. It's going to take as many as it takes.
But by seeing the actual shootings, to expect it to take multiple, I don't know how many it'll take, but I shouldn't be shocked if I shoot and have confidence in my sights and get 2 hits and he doesn't have the common courtesy to fall down for me. I shouldn't be surprised when that happens. I should be surprised when he goes down. Sight, trigger, recover. Sight, trigger, recover. And then all of a sudden, no, he's there no more. Oh, that was enough.
And that was funny that came up in recent discussion. A former mentor of mine, I think you met him at TechCon. You probably run into the same circles with him, but John Holshin.
Oh yeah,
I did a lot of training.
Active shooter instructor.
He did. I know. I've got to get in there. I got to admit,
life both, and did extremely.
I tell you, his wife has become a very, very good shot and a very good trainer. I've known John for probably near 30 years now. At least 25 that I can think of, and I count him among one of my most influential mentors. And he told me something a long time ago, and it won't be an exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, "You're going to shoot if you have to shoot somebody that's trying to kill you. You're going to shoot. You need to shoot them until they're no longer in front of your sight picture, and then you follow them to the ground and find them again." Because the minute you take your eyes off of them is when they're going to pop right back up like that, the gopher, and they're going to be still fighting you.
See if they want to play round 2.
Yeah. You shoot them until they're no longer standing up or in front of your front sight, and then you find them with your sights.
Yep. San Bernardino, that couple that killed the woman in the back of the SUV, the male got out shooting a rifle. They shot him to the ground. He fell to the ground. The rifle bounced away. Laying on his back, he pulled the pistol out of a thigh holster and continued to shoot at the cops.
Yeah.
Laying on the ground. They want to play round two. They're much easier to deal with.
Yeah.
Laying on the ground. But so that makes your job even easier. But don't think the fight's over.
Yeah. You're playing. You're going 9 rounds until you tell me otherwise. You know, a lot.
It's just another reason for people that have a choice. If the cop, it's not a problem on duty because they're carrying a service-sized pistol. But for those of us, for cops off duty and for armed citizens, when they're choosing their gun, the gun that is minimally adequate to stop the mugger may not be the gun that's minimally adequate to stop an active shooter. So if that's one of the things we discussed, if you decide I'm carrying a gun, not only for the mugger, but I either will or there's very possible I will choose to get involved and stop an active shooter, then optimize your gear for that. So having, it shouldn't take you more than 3 or 4 rounds to stop a mugger. Well,
What if
maybe
does?
what if he has a partner? But then the active shooter, I can show you so many where 3 or 4 hits didn't stop. So
Yeah.
maybe that's even more of an argument to carry a gun, not only that's easier to shoot because it's a little bigger, but has more ammo.
It's funny. It's like for, people talk about, like the same thing. You don't need that many shots. You should just take one. It should, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
It should, but it doesn't. And if there's, if you look at the trends that, like from, NIJ and FBI, it used to be, the whole rhyme was 3 and 3, right? It was 3 rounds over in 3 seconds, usually within 3 yards or 3 feet, depending on the interpretation. But the numbers have gone up. Now it's like multiple attackers. It's two idiots trying to come after you. Or the one idiot coming after you is going to need 6 to 7 shots. And if all you're carrying is that 5-shot snubby, you better make sure your hits are good. And then in states like us here in New York, welcome to New York, where we call it the decimal state now, or it's my joke now. It's like, we're just going to stop at 10. What if the fight needs 15 rounds and all I have is that one magazine? I'm losing.
Yep.
I'm severely lost.
That's another difference, another of many differences between the 3 different threats outside the home.
Yeah.
It's very possible, I'll admit, that a mugger somewhere had body armor, but I've never remember hearing or reading about a mugger with body armor. And still, my head's telling me that the majority of active shooters still are not wearing body armor, but it's a growing trend, and obviously many of them have. So that's another. How many trigger presses, how many recoils until your brain goes,
That's not working.
I'm confident in my sights. Not only is he not going down, that's not 1 or 2, but you're 5, 6.
Yeah.
I'm not even seeing degradation. I'm not even seeing staggering, And so now whatever I was carrying, those are gone. Now I need some, and then it just keeps building on itself. I determined now I got to go to a small target, the head or the hips. Well, now I got to go through the hope. Am I close enough to guarantee a headshot?
Right.
I was confident I could guarantee a torso hit, but now I decide I got to go to the head. Do I got to close the distance? By the way,
Everybody knows that.
chance of a duty carry service hollow point going through the entire torso. And I've done read no study, but just casually looking at these shootings, not only active shooters, but these shootings, headshots, a good headshot has a much higher chance of overpenetration than a torso does with a hollow point. So now, if I decide to go to a headshot because I see body armor, or I see what I think is body armor, or I have gotten enough confident trigger presses, I'm fairly sure I'm getting good hits, but they're not doing what I want, I got to go to the head. Well, now am I close enough? And if not, have the tactical patience to move up and say, okay, even if I get the hit, that Rule 4 problem just got a lot worse.
Yes, it did.
Yep.
Yeah. It got a little crazy. So let's change text a little bit. Let's cover a couple other things. Because I think we could easily turn this into a 2 or 3 hour podcast.
Easily.
And it's funny when you get, people have accused me of being very passionate about what I'm doing, and they're right. Just like you are very passionate about what you're doing, or else you wouldn't be traveling the country doing this and trying to influence schools and church, houses of worship and everything. But what about your experience as a teacher? Okay. What were you able to channel from that? You related in the beginning how you started receiving this active shooter training, and your experience as a military or from the military, gave you some unique perspective in an understanding very quickly that your ideas suck.
Yes.
You're going to get people killed.
Yes.
So why don't go one layer further? Now move into from the teacher mindset. And then what did your experience as a teacher give you on improvements and changes in the program, the way we look at this incident and this phenomenon when you started getting into the instructor role? So how did that morph?
So once I determined that there weren't parameters that I didn't understand, this was just horrible. And so we have to change it. But overcoming the inertia, schools are the hardest to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because schools in most places have legal roadblocks and hurdles that in most places, churches, businesses, Walmarts don't have. That even if they understand they need to be armed to stop this, they can't, or it's just a nightmare. But even if, Dr. William April, admired the heck out of him, one of his quotes I use all the time is, to properly plan for violence, you have to admit and accept that the world is not as it ought to be. Well, that also applies in this. I understand right now in America, 98% of schools aren't going to have armed staff. I don't agree with that, but that's the way the world is. So even if you're not going to be armed, we have to do a 180-degree turn, and that's what's hard. Little modifications are easy to get them to accept. What's hard is to get them to accept what we're doing is 100% wrong. We have to turn the ship 180 degrees and hold the other direction. Where we are right now is, in most places, in most schools, we're going to hunker down and do the best we can.
Yep.
Until the professionals show up and deal with this. Well, that gets us 20s, 30s, 40s in victim count, because the time is what no one's factoring in. So we have to change that from we are going to hunker down until the professionals get here to we are going to stop it.
Right.
And we'll be treating casualties by the time the first cop and ambulance gets here. So I got into law enforcement after Columbine, late in my life, after Columbine.
Okay.
So when I got into law enforcement, the active shooter training they did in law enforcement, which all of it was bad, in my opinion, that I personally took. But it all started with Columbine changed the paradigm. No longer are we going to wait outside, we're going in. Because at that time it was, it's inside the building problem, it's a SWAT problem. We'll provide security until SWAT gets here. Well, what Columbine taught us was that don't work because of the clock.
Yes.
Now we have to get beyond where we are now, where we finally evolved to. With Columbine, we went through the first 4 cops will go into a 4-man team. And then that evolved in Navy, and that's the clock still kicking our rear. Now the first 2 cops will go in, buddy. And then it got to single officer response. And that's where we are in most places. But even that, the bravest, well-trained cop that rushes in at the 4 or 5 minute mark, you're not going to like the numbers. You're not going to like the victim count. So we have to get now to the second evolution of that, to where the cops are not the answer.
Yeah.
It's not, we're not going to wait on SWAT. The first responding cop's going to go in. It's that we're not even going to wait on, this is not a cop problem. Mm-hmm. If you think the cop is a solution to this, you're expecting a high victim count.
Yeah. You're losing already.
We got to change that to we, the victims, that are there when we're going to stop it.
Mm-hmm. And
we'll be treating and prepping casualties. Now we want the cops coming. We want the ambulances coming, but we have to stop it, because if you run the numbers, you have to stop the attack roughly within the first 30 seconds to have a good expectation of a single-digit victim count. And that's what I push, single digit, 0 to 9. And I had so many people. We'll see, that just proves if you're not pushing to stop all active shooters together, to have it at 0, then you're not. Well, if I could come up with a plan that had a chance of 0, I'd push it, but I don't.
Right.
And it's kind of be bold for me to think that murders have been going on now since what, 1650 for Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Okay, child, shooter, you think now I have a plan to stop all murders. Active shooters are just a subset of murders. So no, I don't know how to stop them. But so what I focus on is how can we have the lowest victim count? And it's not a guarantee, but if we can, the way the numbers run, with him shooting somebody every 3 to 4 seconds in that first minute, if we can stop him in the first 30 seconds, we got an 80-90% chance of a single-digit victim. There is no mathematical way we can call somebody who's not here when it starts and get them here in time to stop it and be in the single digit.
They can be in the park a lot.
Mathematically, it's not going to happen. So calling the professionals is not a way to get single-digit victims. We have to stop it, and people don't want to hear that because they want something. Okay, an active shooter, what do we do? Stuff they're comfortable with. Turning the doorknob, turning out the lights, pulling the shade. The only thing that gives us a chance, the victims here at the school, at the Walmart, at your church, to get a single-digit victim is we have to do ruthless, vicious, deadly violence against another human. And for most people, that is unacceptable to even think about, much less plan for, much less train.
Yeah. A lot of people haven't, as I said earlier on, there's a lot of people that haven't fathomed how much violence it might take. They don't, because they don't understand the level of violence that's going to be directed towards them or people in their area. So they don't think, how much violence am I going to have to bring to this to stop it? So they just, I'm just not going to worry about it. They escape out of it
by outsourcing it.
Yeah.
And so our
somebody else's problem.
Classroom at last resort has a what do you call it, where you flush the toilet to septic tank.
Okay.
When that thing gets full, I don't want to deal with that. That's something I'm uncomfortable with. So
I called the guy.
To call the guy with the truck to come do that. But no one's getting shot every few seconds that I wait on the guy with the truck.
Right.
Now, if it's Sunday night at my home and I flush
and it
starts backing up, time matters. I can't wait to call the guy and have him come Monday morning. I have to get my hands dirty. I've got to deal with that.
Yeah.
And that's the way they act. I understand it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to do vicious violence. But if you don't, look at the alternative.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side of that, a lot of times in schools, most schools do what's easiest to plan and easiest to train. So they want what's easiest to type in the plan is everybody does the same thing. Active shooter drill, everybody does the same thing. That's the easiest to type.
But it's just like the fire drill. We're going to do just like a fire drill, right? Everybody hunker down or get out.
Exactly. But that's not what we need to do.
No.
We need to tell everybody, the plan needs to tell everybody, you decide. You a teacher, you a janitor, you cook in the cafeteria, you a coach, or you a student that's all alone because you went out to the bathroom or your dad just dropped you off from a dental appointment. You decide what to do. There's 3 options. They all suck. They are all really horrible options.
Right.
Under that situation, you decide which of those 3 is the least horrible for you right now, and you execute it. And you've already thought through the 3. You've already resourced it. You've already war gamed it. So under that stress, your brain can go, what are my options? They're all bad. And you run with it. And what I found in a lot of schools, once they're told that, you have to listen to what the intercom tells you to do, or you have to go over and flip open this 3-ring binder to tab D and read what you decide what to do, and you execute it violently, whether it's violently leaving or physically being violent. Most of the school staff feels freed by that.
Oh, yeah.
Now they can make it. They don't have to follow some rule. They decide. And they get very creative in a lot of cases in how to do the 3 things. But we have to go. It's 180 degrees from hunker down to the best you can till the cops show up to we have to stop it. So Uvalde, the big one that happened. So I spoke at the National Association of School Resource Officers Conference, the annual conference for school resource officers. It was in Indianapolis this year in July. And so they let you on the app. All these conferences have apps now that everybody that attends can get on these apps, and they let instructors post questions before your presentation. And so 95% of the NASRO conference are cops. And who was more responsible for the people who were shot at Uvalde? The school staff or the cops? Well, the cops screwed up. And these are all cops at the conference. 92% said cops. Cops. The cops' action. And I had to break their hearts and tell them no, because the guy shot for 2.5 minutes completely unopposed. And he shot roughly, I could be off by 3 or 4. He shot 125 rounds by my count before the cops got in the building. He shot less than 30 after the cops got in the building. So regardless of what the cops did or didn't do, he had already shot the vast majority of the people he shot before the cops ever got in there. Because the Uvalde School District plan, like almost all other schools' plan is, we're going to let the guy get in here and shoot as many people as he can until the cops come fix it. That is their plan. And we've been doing that for 33 plus years in our country. The school, now we're going to hunker down, we're going to hide, we're going to lock some doors, but basically he can shoot as many people as he can get to, even if that's shooting through the walls like he did in Uvalde or exact doors like he did in Parkland. The school's plan is we're going to let him shoot until the cops come here and stop him. That's an unacceptable plan.
Yeah.
It has to be, we're going to stop him. And I've had, you mean we even going to tell our kids? Exactly. Well, let me ask you this. Do you want a low victim count? Because if you don't care how high the victim count goes, then no, don't train your kids.
Right.
But 5 times school shooters have been shot by unarmed people. 2 were school staff that physically fought them and stopped them. 2 were students.
Mm-hmm.
The other was a construction worker. So students, brave students, unarmed, have stopped active shooters in their schools the same number as the adults have. So I don't care how old you are.
Right.
What matters is how quickly we stop it. Whether you're a student, a staff member, a visiting parent, a construction worker, it doesn't matter. What matters is the clock. It doesn't matter who stops him. It matters how soon we stop him.
Yeah.
Time.
And that keeps the body count down and the risk down.
Yep.
You know, it's amazing. We had that, in my recent memory, we had that one in the Catholic school where the Covenant.
Yeah.
Yes. Covenant. And it was interesting when you break it down with the base of knowledge you have now. And I'm sure you broke that thing down as soon as you saw it. And then I know you waited, I saw your commentary, how you were going to wait to, allow the process to work before you commented on anything. But in my mind was going through all the scenarios, and I'm like, okay, cop got there fairly quickly. He was the first one on scene, and it just so happened like 2 other guys came in like right behind him from what I can remember. Like it was within about a few seconds, all these guys showed up, and then they just went and they started hunting this person down. And granted, it seemed like forever. It was almost painstakingly slow. Like it's just frustrating to hear them going through these rooms and hearing all of a sudden gunfire happen in like a whole nother wing, it sounded like. And then, but I was pretty impressed when they just said, all right, screw it. We got to go. We're going to the sound of gunfire. We know where they are. We got to quit screwing around. Let's go. And then the one guy standing there like with a look on his face, like, I don't know what I'm doing. He just basically pushed that guy out of the way. He says, let's go make this happen. And when they finally decided where this person was, it was like a flow. There wasn't any hesitation. There was maybe a minimal, might have been maybe a split second where they gave the shooter a chance to stop. But he didn't, or she didn't.
Yep.
And they just said, we got to put this person down. And they did.
Yeah, which is one of the things I talk to cops about. If you go to an active shooter and you're at a very high level of assurance that you have found the active shooter, and they haven't dropped their gun and crying or run out of ammo, they are still actively shooting, it is a department and a department lawyer decision. But my opinion is that's not a time to talk. It's not a time to verbally confront. Police drop the weapon. If they are actively shooting people, then what lower percentage than 100%, what percentage of your brain under that kind of stress is functioning, all of that on sights and trigger.
Yeah.
It's not a time to have a discussion with them. They don't need a warning. They're shooting people. Mm-hmm. Now, I could be 100% wrong in everything here. I really don't know what went in the school before the cops got there, so I'm still waiting on that. But my info is cops didn't enter the school until 14 minutes after the first shot. So that's one question outstanding that I'm going to find out is now if this school was way out in the county and a deputy or a trooper had to get out of there, that would not be normal. But in a big metropolitan city, and my recollection is that the cop shows up and says, I need 2 more or I need 3 more. Like there were already cops there, but that hadn't gone in.
Okay.
And then they go in and it looked to me from what I've seen, could be wrong, like they were doing about a medium speed search, which until they heard the shooting start again, and then they transformed to a fast search, which is exactly what we would teach. Right. And so another thing we talk about is not stopping for casualties. If you're the one with the gun, and we got one down, keep moving. Yeah. So there he is, report it. We got one. That's not our job. Our job is to stop future injuries, not to start treating old injuries. Right. It's a losing.
Don't worry about them when I come back.
Yes, exactly. It's a losing mathematical proposition. I cannot patch holes faster than he can make new holes if he's still shooting. Right. I can't evac casualties faster than he can make new casualties. So if you got a gun in your hand, your job is to go stop future casualties. And then as soon as they saw her, shot. Yeah. And that's what we got to do.
And
whoever's close, get to them and put them down.
Yeah. It was kind of interesting how they knew who had what gear. Right? We had a couple pistol guys, we had a shotgun guy somewhere, and we had a rifle guy. And they're like, we need the surgical guy up front. And they pushed him up front. And, I don't even know if the handgun guy or the shotgun guy got anything on it, but it was very decisive when, as soon as that shooter came into view,
Yeah, I've heard
it was done.
I've heard a lot of people criticize that, if we're waiting on the rifle guy to move to the front. I don't have a problem. Now, if you said, hey, the rifle guy's en route, let's park it here for a couple of minutes until they arrive, I got a problem with that. But if he's already in your group, I ain't got a problem with that.
Yeah.
And then you could tell that, they were all cops, but some were a little more motivated than the others, and they were pushing, go, pushing them from the back, go,
Yeah.
go. And that's,
we need to get
everybody,
that.
badge or not, is not going to be as motivated.
Right.
So again, all of the federal government and all the agencies, and I'm not going to list them, but they go through, they have some version of run, hide, fight. Fight is at the end of the list, and all of them that I know of say fight only as a last resort. Try to run, try to hide, but if he finds you, if you're cornered, then begrudgingly, I guess you're going to have to fight. And we got to change that and put fight first. We have to fight first, because the quicker we fight him, the fewer casualties. And I had a guy, I have a 5-year-old in pre-K. You tell me I got to tell my daughter she's got to fight. No, everybody doesn't have to fight. Somebody has to.
Somebody.
But guess what? He's going to start his attack in a crowded place. So there's going to be a lot of people there. We only need 1 or 2. Out of the 20, 30, 50, hundreds of people that are here, all we need is 1 or 2.
Yeah.
And it works quite often, with or without a gun. It can still work. So there's 3 ways to stop an active shooter. 1 is to shoot him down. That has an unbelievably high track record. Unbelievably good success rate in shooting them down. Or by threatening them with deadly force, they shoot themselves. That has a really good track record. Or if you don't have a gun, now there's only 2 options. And they're both really, really bad. Your 2 options are attack him unarmed, which is pretty bad option. Or if you don't do that, the only alternative is you watch a bunch of people get shot, which is probably worse. So you got to fight either way. If you got a gun, it's going to be a lot more efficient, a lot more higher success rate. But if you don't have a gun because you're in a school where it's illegal, or when I flew here and I'm behind TSA, okay, there's got to be another option. And so I have to be accessing what are my weapons options. You got to fight him either way.
Yeah. So Ed, we've thrown a lot of stuff around here, and we've kind of tickled it a little bit. We've kind of hinted where I've mentioned, and you've kind of echoed it, where us normal people don't go around thinking like violent people all the time.
Thank God.
That's to be a lot crazier, right? But one of the things that I try to is to get into people's heads is we have to understand them a little bit. So it's not like we have to become them, but we have to learn how they think. And one of the things I did a long time ago is I tell people, you should study how criminals target other people. All right, what are they looking for you as a victim in order to victimize you? And then avoid doing that stuff, right? So that kind of leads me into this, not just for the active shooter stuff, but in your experience, we should understand bad guys don't think like us.
Yeah, and there's you'll get some debate that I don't really think there needs to be debate on, but it gets into the macro and the micro. Well, they think like us. Well, you take the mugger and the armed robber. They think like us in that they will do activity that they think gets them monetary benefit.
Well, exactly.
You and I do it on one side of the legal line. We go work for another company. We go be a doctor. We go get a legal profession, a legal job, and we earn money. They do it on the other side of the law. So we would not cross the line as severely as they do. They're willing to do things that we wouldn't.
Right.
So we can't apply our values to them. I would not sit around a convenience store parking lot, a grocery store parking lot, or Walmart parking lot and stick a knife or a crowbar or a gun in another person's face and say, give me your keys, give me your wallet, give me, they will. So I don't have to be like them, but I just have to understand. And this gets back to understanding the threat and the environment.
Right.
Well, the environment is the Walmart parking lot somewhere close to my car. So
exactly.
And so this is an understanding that how they will act, and in some cases why they will act that way. I won't walk into a church or a school or Walmart and just shoot a bunch of people I don't know. They will.
Right.
If I knew for some reason I knew I was going to go into a public place and shoot a bunch of people I didn't know and then die at the end of that, either getting a shootout with the cops or by shooting myself in the head, I wouldn't be happy about it. But a lot of these active shooters that are planning to go do that, and they know by the end of that day, they will be dead or they'll be in custody for the rest of their, and a lot of these shooters are young. So we're talking about 50, 60 years, the rest of my life, I'm going to be in prison.
Yeah.
And they're happy about that because this to them is the end to problems and the solution. And the Townville Elementary, he's going to go shoot, he wants to get at least 50 kids that he doesn't know in an elementary school. And he's planning on killing himself when it's over. And he's videoing himself combing his hair, going, you got to have your hair looking good before you go. They're happy. So that makes them a different, and after one of these active shooters, well, we have to increase the penalty for this. Like, dude, they're giving themselves the death penalty. So this is not the normal criminal.
So they know what the consequences are going to be, and they're accepting them.
They're happy.
Yeah, they're expecting it.
Their perspective, this is their way out.
Yeah.
This is their way out.
This is how they become famous.
So
infamous.
We can't prepare our response to them like we would a response to ourselves, because we would never do this. So the Parkland shooting, where he went in and shot 34 people, he shot the first 24 on the first floor. He only shot into 3 classrooms. One of the classrooms, 1214, the teacher didn't get hit, but she saw a bunch of her kids get shot, some of them killed in front of her. And in a video, in an interview, she says, I'm crouched behind my desk, my teacher's desk, watching all this happen. And he never did go in the classroom, but he could have. She says he could have, he shot through the glass. He could have just reached in and opened the door, and she fully expected him to do that. And I would have too, in her situation. And she said, I'm crouched behind my desk trying to think, what should I do when he comes in? What am I going to do when he comes in? What am I going to do when he comes in? And I finally decided when he came in my room, I was going to stand up and say, we love you.
I remember seeing that interview.
Who could shoot somebody that loves them? Well, he could.
He probably would have, yes.
That's a clear not understanding that they are different than we are.
Yeah, they're not confused about what they're doing.
And I've been doing this 16 years, but only since Uvalde. Only in the last couple of years have I had mostly schools, but organizations call me and say, hey, will you come teach our staff how to de-escalate this thing and talk this guy down? And I say, no, because I know that's how you would like it to end, because that's
not how it's going to happen.
And it's not violent, so we don't have to talk about. I would love to be able to talk him down, but in almost all cases, that won't work. But that's what they want. They desperately want a device, a metal detector, more cameras, see-through backpacks, better locks on the doors. They desperately just want something they can buy or a law they can pass that'll fix this. But that's what they're desperately grasping.
And it's the, there's a bunch of different mindsets at play here. There's some mindset of every life is valuable. And I don't completely disagree with that. I believe everybody has some value of some sort until you yourself decide you're not valuable.
Well, and it gets into what most law enforcement teaches is when you come on a violent scene, what is the priority?
Yeah.
In most law enforcement, what they would teach is the first priority is innocent victims.
Yeah.
Then law enforcement. So why would you go in there knowing there's a guy in there shooting people? Because they are more valuable. They are a higher priority than you. So you go risk your life to go in there. So first is innocent citizens, innocence. The second then is law enforcement.
Right.
And then the third is a suspect. So it's not that their life has no value, but if causing them harm or ending their life puts the top priority of innocent victims in a safer way, then it's just a mathematical, non-emotional thing. They got to go.
Yeah.
If you told me, Ed, I just can't do it. Sparky's my dog. I've had him for 15 years, but he's rabid, and I've got him in a cage out there. I can't do it. Go. Here's a pistol. Go take care of Sparky. I don't think anybody would take great pleasure.
No.
That dog somewhere or another has to be dealt with. I take no pleasure in it. Don't want to do it. But it's something that has to be done. Again, it gets to William's point of you have to accept the world is not as it ought to be. We ought not have childhood cancer. What a horrible, horrible, ugly thing that is. But that's the world we live in. So we have serious doctors and researchers and medications and treatments and hospitals that don't hope things get better. every day working really hard for adult leadership to make that not as bad as it used to be.
Right.
We ought not have hurricanes that slam into coastal cities and kill hundreds, if not thousands of people and billions of dollars in damage. But that's the world we live in. So we have building codes for hurricane resistance.
Emergency response plans.
Yeah, we have serious. We just don't hope the hurricane doesn't.
Yeah.
Or hope nobody drowns. Or hope no buildings collapse.
Boy, I hope I don't ever have to use my gun.
So we should not live in a world where people walk into schools and Walmarts and churches to shoot people. But that's the world we live in. So we have to have serious adult countermeasures to that.
And serious ones that I was talking to somebody just recently, and they're involved with a security team for a private a religious school, and I'm trying to push them into, hey, here's the reality of what you're going to need to do, and there's some resistance, but we're getting there. And what this guy's telling me is, and he understands that there's going to need to be an armed response to an armed invasion. Because you got to meet force with force or you're going to lose.
Yep.
You can't play defensive because what's the phrase? A bunch of people have told me this. If you're only playing defense, it just means you're losing slowly.
Yep.
And in some cases, you're going to lose a lot faster than you expect. But you have to go on the offense at some point. And he and I have spent a lot of time talking, and he's trying to infuse the idea that not if somebody ever comes in, when this guy comes into their church school and starts causing harm to staff and or students, they are going to have to put him down. No amount of talking.
If they want a low victim count.
Yeah. There's no hope. Well, we hope it doesn't happen, so we're going to do these minor, changes. We're going to get window film. Cool, that's a start. We're going to get better cameras. We're going to lock the outer doors. We're getting somewhere. But what happens when those don't work?
Yep. So what I tell them is there's nothing wrong with hope. There's nothing, you hope with all your heart that there's never an active shooter attack, or at least not one at your location. But if you're not planning, like he's coming to you tomorrow, you're not adequately planning. Right. And we understand this. I'm here with you now. My home is in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. I hope.
You wouldn't be here if you didn't believe in this.
Yeah. I hope while I'm away from my home, no burglar breaks into my house.
Right.
But do you think I lock my doors before I leave?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know hope doesn't always work. When I drove here from the hotel, I hoped a drunk driver or a texting inattentive driver didn't cross the center line and smack into me. I hope that didn't happen, but I still put my seatbelt on, not because it might be state law, but because I know that's the only thing that can save my life.
Right, and we still drive with some, I hate saying we drive defensively. I drive assertively. Like if I know I've got to get there, I'm going to be there. But I'm also going to have a plan that if somebody pulls into my lane or drifts across the center line, I have a plan for that if it interrupts my plan of driving in this direction. Yeah. But I don't, like you said, I hope I can make it to work today. Okay, I have a plan on making it to work today, but I also have an alternative plan if that doesn't work.
And that's what the active shooter response plan is. Hope he doesn't show up, but by God, if he does, we got a little something for him. Yeah. We got a welcoming party. So with schools, cameras, since Uvalde.
Oh, yeah.
We got emergency funding. We have state-of-the-art cameras. We have cameras everywhere. And I break their heart when I tell them that's not going to help. It'll help with I'm not saying don't have cameras in the school. It'll help with everything else. Right. The vapor, the smoker, the bully, the vandal, the drug dealer, none of those kids want to get caught.
Right.
So they don't want to be on camera because that's evidence against them. That will help deter, relocate them. The active shooter wants desperately to be on camera. And for the news,
they come in and look at the cameras.
And the new trend is they're not even happy with your cameras, so they GoPro, they video themselves, so they're sure that they get good coverage.
And they're streaming it live in as many cases as they can.
So I'm not saying don't have cameras for other security,
right?
But don't think that's going to stop it here. Or we got better locks. So the first school I worked with, probably 10 days after Uvalde, we got emergency school board meeting. We got emergency funding. We did a lot of research. And he had about the size of a shoebox, this huge lock across the middle beam of the door. Of course, there was a glass panel on top of the bar and a glass panel below the bar on the door. But there was this big crossbar and this huge lock. And according to him, this principle, a nuclear weapon couldn't defeat this lock. This was like really good lock. But when I just pointed at the glass, I said, you don't think he would just shoot it?
Oh.
He just blinked at me. Like, again, they have no experience
You just
wargaming and thinking through what could go wrong.
you just reset his computer.
For fences. We just put up a 6-foot fence that cost us $80,000. We got this in response to Uvalde.
Yeah.
But you're a high school, right? Yeah. Who's your shooter going to be?
Yeah.
One of your own students.
Somebody inside.
If you sent a bus to go get him and bring him through that big fence you just built. So we're not thinking it through. We just think fence, lock, camera, security. Well, not against this guy. Maybe against other people. And harden the building, better doors, locks, make them buzz people in, make them show IDs.
Okay.
In the middle and a high school, any hardening of the building for the active shooter. Now, for other threats, if your school's in a bad neighborhood and you got problems with thugs and thuglets and gangbangers, okay, I got it. But again, for a middle and a high school, the odds are great that your shooter is already in the building. He's one of your own students.
Yeah.
So any hardening of the building will probably only have the negative effect of delaying cops and ambulances. We're not thinking this through. Again, we want to write a check, get better locks, get better cameras, get higher fences.
That's the easy answer.
Instead of, we have to have a plan to be unbelievably, ruthlessly violent against
Yeah. So let me ask you this, based on what we've just talked about. When you've interacted with people and you've taught this topic quite a bit now, and when you get on the topic of how bad guys don't think like us, in feedback and people that have talked to you, what is kind of the biggest shock and wow factor, or what gets their eyes blinking so much when you tell them how bad guys don't think like us? What thing hits them when they go, oh, wow?
I think showing them, and so raise it to the top, but I think showing them parts of the manifestos of shooters of what they wrote.
Okay.
Explaining what they intend to do and how they can't wait to do it. And it's going to be so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
And videos of them talking about it. And then again, the video of the shooter in court at his sentencing hearing.
Oh yeah.
Who said, I masturbate at the memory of killing these people. That's who's coming. So I have a slide where it shows a Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur. And I say, plan for this. And then I put up the Geico lizard, not for this, because that's
exactly.
They are, again, most of us, we can't even wrap our brain around. I'm going into a public place and trying to shoot 50 people that I've never met, that have never done anything to me. In the evidence video of the San Ysidro McDonald's, there's a 3-month-old baby there, shot several times. It's other than pooping his diaper, that little thing has never done anything wrong.
Yeah.
Who could possibly want to hurt? Well, these people. That's who they are.
It's a body.
I don't know why. Some people are wired wrong at the factory. Some people, sometimes their kidneys stop working at some point in their life. Some people, their livers stop working right. Some people, their brains go out of factory spec at some point in their life. I can't explain it.
Or that neurological wiring change that happens.
Thurston shooter said, I hear voices in my head. I just have to kill people. I've never experienced, I can't relate to him. I just know that exists.
Right.
And so that's what I have to deal with. And that's what we have to, whether we're a school, a business, a church, if we're serious about having a low victim count, that's who we have to do adult planning for. And he's coming in here, it's very ugly. It's going to be very ugly and violent. So our plan can't be pretty.
Right.
Our plan to counter that has to be ugly and violent.
And it has to meet force with force. Yeah. So, Ed, thank you so much for sitting down with us and talking.
Thanks for having me.
Still, every time I sit there and, watching your stuff on Facebook, watching what you're putting out there, I'm like, okay, another nugget to add to the basket. Another interesting way of describing this and talking about this. I've got a feeling, even the class that we're going to be sitting through is not going to be enough. And I know it's probably to me, it would be a drop in the bucket in the ocean of what could be talked about.
What's sad is, given 10 to 12 hours of talking about the active shooter, I have a tough time taking out enough stuff to get it down to 10 or 12 hours.
I know.
How sad is that?
When's part 2? To bring you back for the add-on. So I want to thank everybody for joining us for this chat. It was great that Ed had a few minutes extra for this weekend before he goes and, teaches the whole weekend here. But Ed, before we close out, please share where they can find you and your info.
Okay, we don't have a web page. We're not that high tech. But we do have a Facebook page. You can look for Last Resort Firearms Training on Facebook. You're welcome to see our information there or contact us through messaging. My cell number is 870-273-1113. You can call or text. My email is my name, edmonk, EDMONK at AOL.com. I travel the country. I do presentations at conferences, at schools, at churches, at law enforcement agencies, at businesses, and I do live fire training focused on the active shooter as well as other things. So if I can help you in any way, even answer a question, reach out.
Cool. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ed. And as for us, guys, thank you for joining us for this podcast. It was great info. Hopefully you gained something out of it. To get a hold of us, you can find us on Facebook on Rochester Personal Defense. You can find us on Instagram, same thing, at Rochester Personal Defense or Safe in Rochester. You can call us by phone, area code 585-406-6758, or on the web at safeinrochester.com. And if you like this episode, please let us know. Throw some comments down there. As any good instructor will always ask you, what can we do to make it better? But what did you like about it? That's what we want to know too. And throw a like out there and share this thing out there. Let's spread the word.